Hello, this is Michael Hexter, and welcome to Politics 2100 here on YouTube. So, this episode I'm calling In Path to Gaza Genocide, Israel, the U.S., Europe, undermining the post-World War II liberal order from the inside. So, current political struggles, both on the electoral level and also in civil society more generally, are often stylized as sort of democracies, and I can call them liberal democracies, versus authoritarianism or autocracies. And most people think about in the broader scheme of things, liberalism is the basis for, from the 18th century on, the formation of representative democracies, freedom of the press, the freeing of individuals from various forms of serfdom, and also people, the ideal of society being a commonwealth or a coming together of free individuals who can speak freely, can vote for their representatives, their government, and a movement away from the feudalist society. Or other kinds of autocracy. And so we have now, though, the U.S. and Europe, Western Europe, claiming that they, along with Israel, are representing liberal values, democracy, so forth and so on, versus, let's say, other countries in the world like Iran and Russia and China and so forth and so on, who are considered to be in this group autocracies. And the fight in the Middle East, or fight in Israel, Palestine, is stylized that way as well, because Hamas is, while they were elected, or they received votes in 2006, I believe it was. They have not been. There's been no election since. Not in a way by any fault of, or very very little fault of the Palestinians, but Hamas is not committed to liberal democracy as a value, and also its supporters in the Gulf monarchies are not also committed to that as well. So in Qatar in particular. So you have here, though, this military fight of or the potential for Palestinians to have a voice or a say in their lives is being suppressed by militarily by a government, Israel, that is denying them this right in different ways. And there are people who make different arguments about, well, they had their chance and then they failed at it, so forth and so on. I'm not saying that there is a burgeoning movement among Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank for a civil society, but they have pretty much been under military rule and apartheid. This is the product of oppression and really Western imperialism in the Levant, in that area of the Middle East, for a century. And so I'm not saying before that they experienced robust democracies there, or that there was a society that was desirable from the point of view of the 21st century for the people who lived there before the immigration of European Jewry into that area, or some Jews, under the inspiration of the Zionist movement. So, but anyway, the state of Israel's self-representation continues to be that of a democracy, even though it denies democracy in different ways to the Palestinians, and most glaringly and obviously supporting Hamas, which is an anti-democratic force, over the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, trying to undermine over the last 15, 20 years the Oslo Peace Accords, and trying to shift the Palestinian society toward a more of a religious fundamentalist leadership, at least. That's not necessarily what's in the hearts of everybody. 6% of Gaza voted for Hamas that is currently living in. So in other words, and there's been no elections in 17 years or so there. So that means that they're not a democracy, certainly, but not so much by choice. And again, I'm not saying there's a burgeoning movement for that, partly because they are so under their economy and their livelihood is so immiserated by the Israeli occupation, and there is an active effort by forces in Israel to undermine anything that looks like a democracy in that area. So anyway, so we have now with the siege of Gaza, the bombing of Gaza, and the cutting off of water. Now it looks like recently that Biden has, in the last 24 hours or so, has spoken to Netanyahu, and somehow the water has turned on again. Electricity is not on, as far as I know. But the bombing, the impulsive bombing, so forth and so on, of Gaza, the couple thousand Gazans at least that have been killed, their numbers are now greater, in terms of their casualty numbers, are greater than what were killed in that horrible day when Hamas attacked Israel. So we have a Israeli government that is claiming that all these casualties are just a byproduct of an effort to catch terrorists, catch, essentially war criminals, and they are not war criminals for using inappropriate and for inappropriate types of force to bring Hamas war criminals to justice, and it's an ineffective way, and they, in my opinion, and in the way I've been discussing this in the last several videos, it's impulsive and basically it's falling into the plan of Hamas for this kind of overreaction. Hamas took the measure of the Likud party and the leadership of Israel, and they realized that this kind of a assault would provoke this over response, create martyrs, many martyrs in Palestine, and then would create a big regional war against Israel. And that's speculation, but it seems likely. It certainly was if we look at the way Osama bin Laden provoked the United States into wars through the 9/11 attacks, there's plenty of evidence that they can rely on to say this is likely to happen. Also, obviously, the specifics of the Likud government, and so and also the fact that Likud literally has said we support Hamas over the Palestinian Authority. So anyway, there's now been a total carte blanche given to Israel's illiberal, you can say, or anti-liberal assault on Gaza. In other words, it violates the regime of human rights that has been established in post-World War II, not only America, but just worldwide. The effort now, human rights is is something that is applied not in a consistent way, throughout the world, but the ideal of international human rights is a powerful idea, certainly, for positive change to occur in a number of societies. It can also be used as a cover if it's used hypocritically, if it's used in combination with a military oppression to impose a regime on a society that is not maybe ready, or is not from the inside not deciding that they want to grant whatever, in the case of Saudi Arabia, the rights, or in Iran the rights to women to drive, or to wear what they want on the street, so forth and so on. So anyway, so what we have, though, the potential for a genocide. I mean, beside the specifics of the enormous irony is too mild a word, of the Jewish people who had just a couple generations ago experienced a genocide against themselves, and then founded the state of Israel as a response, perpetrate a genocide, or continue the perpetration, flaunting it, the genocide of the people who originally lived or in the Levant, and so this attack by Hamas can be seen as another opportunity for another Nakba. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but anyway, another catastrophe for the Palestinians, and it is happening right now. Okay, that it is going in that direction. There could be international pressure on Israel to halt it, but there really should, beside halting it, there should be a international program of creating an arena where legally and politically both the damages from this war and the damages from the occupation of both Gaza and the West Bank, illegal under international law, that can be adjudicated, and the foundation of a well-sized Palestinian state can occur that will allow not only just well-sized but well-resourced Palestinian state can occur, there can be a conviviality or cooperation developed between the Jews and the Arab, Muslim, and Christian people who live in that area. And that can be, it sounds extremely idealistic, I understand, to say all those things. And it's going to be a long process, but we don't have the leaders. The leaders have chosen each other right now. The leaders who are fomenting hate, fomenting war, and now fomenting genocide. And in Hamas's view, they want Israel to tarnish itself, and also the liberal order, the world liberal order, to tarnish itself, to destroy itself from within, and not just Hamas, but there are other Putin, other members of this autocratic axis don't want people outside their country having a conception of, and in their country, more importantly, in their country, have a conception of human rights that questions their rule, their autocratic rule, and their overwhelming dominance, undergirded by a secret police and by a military and so forth and so on, and paramilitaries in some countries. So they don't want that to exist and to be applied in a fair way, and they want to characterize that as this sort of genocide, or this this liberal imperialism that, or not it's liberal in quotation, not but hypocritically liberal imperialism that you see in Gaza and you see in the West Bank. And so they want it to be branded that way. And the Israeli government is in a way happy to oblige. They have there are in Israel some very committed, human rights and like B'Tselem and other groups and newspapers committed to civil society, political forces also committed to civil society, and to a cooperation between Palestinians and other Arab groups and other non-Jewish groups and Jewish people, and to essentially, what has to happen is to step down the domination, the military domination of Palestinians and under conditions of security for the Jews who live there, for Israelis who live there. So that's a hard process. The current leadership is going in the opposite direction, and at the same time, also we need this a regime. If we have a consistent regime for human rights and for the creation of civil society or the reinforcement of civil society in Israel, the refining of it, but expanding it to include, or let's say in the Levant, expanded to include people who are living under military occupation, who need to be given their full rights of self-determination. So, with some, the Israelis have lived there long enough, and they put whatever, and it's so there needs to be a reparations or reconciliation with the theft of land. So there needs to be reparations for that in some way, and it's very present and very real. So that process will be a long one, okay, and it's nowhere near the current political discourse certainly in the seats of power in either Palestine or in for different reasons, or in Israel. So anyway. But this so we see this undermining of the liberal order. So also in Europe, for instance, we have people unable in Germany to protest for Palestinian rights, including Jews. So just recently, there are a number of Jewish people there was a demonstration by Jewish people in Berlin against the occupation for Palestinian rights, and it was forbidden by the police. So we have in Europe and in the European Union an exception made that, in other words, human rights only apply to Israelis and Europeans and no one else. Okay, and not to Africans, not to Arabic people who live in various countries in northern Africa, obviously, but in the Middle East, in Western Asia, so forth and so on. So this inconsistency in extending the rights of liberal rights to people who are not within the sort of core area of, or at least the potential for that. Not you can't impose that by military conquest, but to allow for that. And certainly the way interventions have occurred, the way the U.S. has intervened in other countries, and then also Israel has intervened in a smaller way within its own region, but also in the U.S. too. We have an illiberal order when it comes to discussing it is academics cannot criticize Israel. There are politicians cannot criticize Israel. We just had 3 MSNBC anchors who are all of Muslim origin, who have been the most critical of not only Israel or and have stood up most for Muslim peoples around the world, but also and also the United States. But they also tend to be. They're not the only people, but they tend to be the most critical in the mainstream media. These 3, Ayman Mohleddin, Mehdi Hassan, and Ali Velshi. And so, Chris Hayes has also been doing some good work, and some of their efforts, I think, are seen drift. But they have been temporarily, it seems, some of their regular shows, MSNBC is denying canceling them, but and said, well, they're doing commentary and this and that, and they're being invited on the shows, but they had regular shows, not every day, but and they have been kept to the margin. So because, and this is something for me as a Jew, a left-wing Jew, who also appreciates the promise of liberalism, even though the promise has been undermined by liberals and it's been used as a weapon especially in Israel and other places, and it's been used is now being used in the European Union as a weapon against the voices of people who are critical of Israel to come up. And so anyway, so this is this illiberal turn in by people who are professing to protect democracy and liberalism is a huge scandal. Okay, it's an enormous scandal. It's big, and so I'm not saying this to say that they are not better than the people who are shilling for autocracy. And not a shilling, are trying to build autocracies, are trying to undermine the civil society, trying to undermine the rights of minorities in various societies, and also to undermine the social welfare state, and to undermine the idea of universal human rights. So the universalism is one component that in the implementation of quote unquote liberalism by governments, by the big powerful governments, is that's one of the first things that falls away when it comes to their supposed enemies or the people who stand outside, the brown and black people, the people from developing countries or from non-Christian countries, or Christian-dominated countries, let's say. So, or the state of Israel. So the state of Israel is made to be this exception to this Christian domination of the idea of sort of liberalism for us, but not for thee, or the benefits of freedom. Let's use the word freedom. Liberal freedom, they're closely related, even though so. There's the right wing who tries to claim freedom as being freedom to be illiberal and racist and so forth and so on, and freedom to undermine the civil society by carrying a gun and having an enormous truck that you can't see pedestrians out of, and you can kill people with very easily. All these things are problems in the sort of right-wing conception of quote-unquote freedom. But, so having freedom for all, the maximizing freedom for all is something that is the project of, and prosperity for all is a project that is a tendency, let's say, of liberalism that especially is embraced by progressives. So a quick side note here is that also there are people who are advocating for Palestinian nationhood, or for the new intifada, you could say, or if it's not quite an intifada, the the Hamas attacks, or at least the advocating against or saying Israel shouldn't strangle Gaza, all these things, which is a good thing that they wouldn't do that and to fight that. But some are, and this is not new. This is, and I had a couple episodes about, or at least one about, the anti-liberalism of Marx and of then some of people who have taken inspiration from Marx, which I consider to be a fundamental flaw of Marxist ideology. Not because liberalism is necessarily so great in terms of its actual expressions, and people, or the people who call themselves liberal now, are that they're such great actors. In politics, they do some good things and some terrible things, and they're very hypocritical. They're extremely hypocritical, including Joe Biden. I mean, he doesn't necessarily want to be consistently, but he wants to play to liberals. He wants to be considered the liberaler alternative to Donald Trump and the Republicans, and so forth and so on. He wants to be, and anyway, be that representative of those people, but at the same time, he's extremely, it seems, malleable, or lacks courage, or just doesn't care, or is really part of the other team in terms of wanting not really the goals of liberalism and democracy, or wants it only to the extent that it feels good to him. So, and makes him, and confirms his 50-year career in government and what he's done and some of the damage he's done in that career, which is substantial. So, confirms in senses that it was quote unquote good what he did. So, but he has done some things better than Trump, and he would be in the face-off with Trump. He sends a much higher probability of being better than Trump. But anyway, even so there's a left, though, that sees all of this hypocrisy, and it is hypocrisy, and says this whole liberalism thing is bunk. It's bunk. They don't say it in these words, and if they did, they might reflect a little more about it, but they see the worst expressions of, for instance, the imperialism, the militarism of these people who claim to be democracies and liberal, and they are terrible things that are done. So it's not, they don't say 100% things that are wrong. They're clearly flaws. So, but what they do is they take the ideals, and they seem to be throwing them out entirely. And then they ally themselves with Putin and other people who don't give a rat's ass about anything liberal, and they're illiberal, okay? And for that matter, Trump and others. So they don't have a feeling they don't feel the ideals of liberalism. And also, and this is something I'm going to do a video about this, they don't understand that their own political project is dependent in a way on the existence of liberal democracy in some form or another, that they are ungrateful recipients of some of those rights that they at the same time sneer at, okay? And as was Marx, okay? And so they don't have a consistent ideology. I'm not saying the liberals do have a consistent ideology. Liberals' association with capitalism and with corporate capitalism is an extreme, undermines their claims to probity and to morality a great deal. In other words, when they don't look at the lack of rights that workers have, the lack of rights and the corrupting influence of enormous amounts of money being spent on on politicians, corruption basically, that is, and the enormous income inequality and the enormous wealth inequality in many societies. And also the destruction of the planet which we live on by growth-oriented, growth-fixated capitalism, and the lack of alternative, a circular alternative to capitalism, and whether capitalism could be circular. I still haven't come to my formulation of what that is, but certainly we need it strictly regulated. If capitalism is going to exist, we need it highly regulated, or some forms in some sectors of the economy. And we need it, antitrust, safety, and lots of in the United States, we don't have a public healthcare system, and all that and a weakened public education system that's being undermined for a number of reasons. Anyway, but the group of people who are on the left who are satirizing the idea of or who are not valuing, and this also includes, by the way, people who it seems to me that people in the Palestinian resistance are not particularly valuing of those things. And some of them, they're not necessarily Hamas supporters, but they've seen how the Palestinian Authority became corrupt, or is corrupt, or certainly became it, and so they're not sold entirely on the idea of developing their own civil society and then a political system and elections and so forth and so on. I mean, for good, there's a huge weight on them. So I'm not saying they wouldn't do it if there wasn't that Israeli boot on their necks. But anyway, but right now, at least, there are some individuals that are talking along these lines, but it's not a major movement. And there are others who just sort of saying, what we want is revenge, so forth and so on. And they're there are bookends to the Israeli attack. They're basically just, being shaking their fist and trying to be, quote unquote, as militant as possible and potentially violent as possible. So not everybody, and it's not, and the cause of Palestinian liberation is a just one, but at the same time, there has to be a political evolution both on the Israeli side and the Palestinian side. But anyway, this video though is about how by tying themselves, the European Union and European countries and the United States, to Israel's phony or degraded and ethnic democracy, ethnically, apartheid, you could say, and then the potential genocide that will be a stain forever on all the politicians who touch it, who are a part of it, and it will just drag the ideals of the idea of a civil society and democracy and voting and it will drag all those things in the dust. Okay, it will be that needs, if the actors involved in this, the leaders, Joe Biden, Anthony Blinken, they need to step up and start to put distance between themselves, and also tell Netanyahu who doesn't care about those things. He doesn't care. He wants to just talk and claim to be superior in any way possible. He's an ethno-nationalist. He doesn't, an authoritarian. He doesn't really care about those things, but he pretends he uses that game, and he talks the game, so forth and so on. So anyway, that dragging down of this order of human rights and so forth and so on, and creating a mockery of it, is what needs to stop happening. And the first step in doing that is to stop genocide and ethnic land theft, okay, you could say, and land theft from the Palestinians by Israeli military operations. Okay, I'll stop here. Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Please like the video if you thought it was worthwhile in some form or another. And please subscribe to Politics 2100, and look forward to seeing you in the next video.